Okay, so next slide. Okay, so this list here is meant to illustrate the particular categories of workers when we refer to international migrant workers. And some of them are the not so obvious examples. Sometimes people don't realize that they are categorized as migrants. So first of all, we've got frontier workers. They are not who are not usual residents of the country of measurement, but they have been given permission to be employed on a continuous basis in that country.
Maria, please unmute yourself.
Okay, so let me take this again. So first of all, we've got frontier workers. They are not usual residents of the country of measurement, but they have been given permission to be employed on a continuous basis in that country, provided that they depart at regular intervals from the country. The second example is seasonal workers. They are not usual residents of the country, and their work is dependent on the season, based on seasonal condition, and they perform their work in that country during part of the year only. And I think it is sometimes a bit hard to capture seasonal workers because they're coming in and out. Then there are refugees, working or seeking work refugees and asylum seekers. So regardless of whether or not they were given authorization to work, when their status were being processed, and we all know that it happens, that they end up working. Then we've got foreign domestic workers. They are engaged by resident employers. Another examples are the workers employed on an offshore installation that is under the jurisdiction of the country of measurement, but they are not the nationals of the country and becomes a bit difficult to classify them at times. And then we've got other groups, for example, foreign students. They enter the country for the purpose of studying, but then they work or they start seeking work, meaning they try to combine work and study. So for all these groups, they are considered as international migrant workers. Okay, so now we move to the next concept, which is for work international migrants. So for this measure here, for work international migrants, it is intended to measure the movements of persons from one country to another for the purpose of undertaking or seeking work. And for statistical purpose, for work international migrants, are all international migrants as we defined them on the previous slides, meaning they are usual residents as well as the not usual residents, who entered the country of measurement during a specified reference period, like I said, for working or for seeking work. And their intention was declared at the time of entry to the country. So the specified reference period for the measurement of for work international migrants should be long. So such as the previous 12 months of the calendar year. We know that when we're talking about undertaking or seeking employment, we're adhering to the 19th ICLS resolution. So they could be considered as unemployed, meaning they are not working, they are available to start working and they are seeking work, or as being employed. And when we refer to undocumented or declared, we're talking about being documented in official immigration registers or to the relevant immigration authorities. So now let's go to the third concept, which is return international migrants. Okay, so this one is intended to provide a basis for measuring the work experience of persons returning after they were international migrant workers abroad. For the country of measurement, Returned international migrant workers are defined as all current residents of the country who were previously international migrant workers in another country or multiple countries, other countries. So the measurement of returned international migrant workers does not depend on the current labor force status of the persons in the country of the current residence. So it could include persons who are currently outside the labor force at the time of measurement, or they are the potential labor force. Okay, so returned international migrant workers include those current residents of the country of measurement who were working abroad without being usual residents of the country in which they worked. So it is recommended that the chosen minimum duration of labor attachment abroad for a person to be considered as a returned international migrant worker be short, relatively short, such as 6 months. And we can calculate it on a cumulative basis for workers that have had repeated periods of migration. And for date of return, it is recommended that the reference periods for date of return of international migrant workers in that country should be relatively long, such as 12 months or last 5 years. Okay, so next slide. So international labor migration is characterized by its directionality, duration, and nature. I think you may be familiar to this. So when we're talking about directionality, this is distinguishing between entry and exit of international migrant workers. When we're talking about duration, we're talking about the duration of stay in the country of labor attachment. When we're talking about nature of international labor migration refers to its permanent or temporary status. And for policy purpose, it is important to make such distinctions. Okay, next slide. So here now we're moving on to the database. So we've got the International Labor Migration Statistics Database, which is a set of statistical indicators on international labor migration. And this is within the ILO Stat database on the ILO page. Okay, next one. So the database is important because now migration is an important topic globally. So the database is a compilation of good data, quality data, which I hope serves the purpose of informing policymakers. So with the database, it allows for regular production of global estimates of international migrant workers. And like I said, the database is integrated within the ILO Stat database, so within the ILO Stat data collection system. Okay, so note that this database compiles data on the 3 topics that you see here. So we've got the stock of international migrants, inflow of international migrants, and data on nationals abroad. So for the stock of international migrants, international migrant workers, this is the number of international migrant workers that are present in the country of measurement at a given time. And for these groups, we look at the usual labor market indicators. So for example, the working age population, their employment status, whether or not they're unemployed, we look at their earnings. So we're disaggregating these indicators by migrant status, for example. Then we've got the inflow of work, international migrants. There's a number for work international migrants who have entered the country of measurement during the reference period. So we want to know how many they are. We disaggregate them by sex, by the level of education, occupation, and economic activity. And also for the nationals living abroad group, so we collect the stock of nationals abroad, the inflow of returned migrants, and the outflow of nationals. And we disaggregate them by sex, education level, occupation, and economic activity. Next slide. So here are some examples of the stock indicators that are compiled using the place of birth criterion. As you can see, these are the usual labor market indicators. You are familiar with them. So employment by sex, for example, by economic activity, by occupation, by status in employment, even the working age population, okay, using the place of birth criterion. So on the next slide, we can see that some are collected from the countries. They are compiled directly from the countries, but some are compiled in-house. So the indicators at the bottom of the page. The team compiles the counts and they calculate the rates. So for example, this relates to the indicators that you see at the bottom of the page. And they do this to avoid errors. Then on the next slide, we have the indicators for inflow using the citizenship criterion. Yes. So by sex, by education, by occupation, by economic activity. Okay, next slide. And then on this slide, we have the indicators for the nationals abroad, and again, the same type of disaggregation by sex, by education, by economic activity, by occupation. Okay, so in order to get a comprehensive picture of the experience of the labor migrants, the standards recommend using data from different sources, and I won't go over the sources in depth. It is beyond the scope of this presentation here. But a lot of the information can be obtained from the labor force survey. But the labor force survey has its limits when it comes to labor migration data. So especially when it comes to data on flows. And for data on flows, we need to rely a lot on admin records. We know that using different sources might yield different results. So there has been some work which has started on trying to come up with methodologies to sort of harmonize the estimates and to perhaps reduce the discrepancies. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is showing the response rate of the ILMS questionnaire, which was sent in 2018. So this slide is here to show that unfortunately for this region, when it comes to responding to the questionnaire, we are not doing so well, and the data here speaks for itself. So we know that without data, there is a lack of evidence to advise policies. So I think that the SAMM project is coming in at a very good time. Next slide. So within this region, several countries have the basic migrant. I'm going to be muted. Okay, so okay, that's all right. So in this region, there's quite a number of countries that have got the stock indicators. Okay, so once we establish the migrant status, we can disaggregate the indicators by migrant status, the usual labor market indicators. But the question remains on whether we're covering the right group. So are there enough of them in the sample? Are there enough of them for proper observation? Unfortunately, within this region, when it comes to flow indicators, we've got only one country with such data, and even for national abroad indicators, it is only one country. And they are not the same country. The one with migrant flow data and the one with nationals abroad, they are not the same country. So there is a serious lack of data in this region, especially when it comes to data for flows. So the next slide. So we have some gaps here, and when it comes to data, and this gap refers to the situation globally, not only within our region. Like I said, data on stock is more readily available, but there's still issues with data on stock, and it's not always easy to capture information on migrants, even what you would consider as basic information, such as their working age population, to establish the labor force status. So if we cannot determine their country of birth or citizenship, then it becomes a bit of a problem to get their migrant status. And generally, like I said, there is a limited data on flows, and this is globally. And like I said, data on flows, a lot of the time, they usually come from the admin records. And administrative records, they are not compiled for statistical purpose. Statistics is a byproduct, so it makes it a bit more difficult to get statistics on flows from admin records. And the amount of processing which has to be done with admin records, when you do get them, is actually a lot. So there is a lot of work which needs to be done. So next slide, sorry. There are some solutions that could perhaps set with improving data. And I am a fan of number one, which is setting a focal point. And I always say that in order for the project to be successful, there has to be a focal point, especially within the organization responsible for compiling the information on migration. So in most cases, this is the NSO. And we know that there is a lot of activities, a lot of initiative within the region. So we are hoping that there is better coordination. This would hopefully improve data. So, for example, we've got the African Union, and I know that, for example, later today, I'm attending a session being organized by the African Union on labor migration statistics. So I think that better coordination will actually help with the issue of data management for migration. So I think I'm over time, and I will now pass over to Jesse.
Thank you very much, Maria. I will go straight on to the section on existing data at global and regional levels. Perhaps we can save some of the questions for towards the end. We'll make sure to leave enough time that we can go into a bit of a discussion. Coming back to the reflection that I asked you to do at the very beginning of the session, I've now come to the second question that I'd like you to reflect on, which is, having heard from Maria the kind of data that is produced and the technicalities involved in producing them and some of the challenges involved in producing them, having thought about the data or statistics that you do use, now reflect on what kind of labor migration data or statistics would you want to see available in order to improve the functioning or effectiveness of your institution in terms of developing policies or implementing those that already exist. And again, I invite you to put those reflections in the chat box for everybody else to also see. So, what data exists on labor migration globally? Well, the ILO a few years ago has produced the document called the Global Estimates on International Migrant Workers. This is the second edition. looking at the current state of labor migration and key characteristics of migrant workers in the world today. And it presents estimates of migrant workers that have been collected through the ILMS database, which Maria spoke about, and through the questionnaire, which she mentioned as well, using the definitions and concepts outlined in the ICLS guidelines, which Maria also explained, and tries to provide estimates, not just for those countries that have submitted data, but imputing missing data for countries which haven't, in order to come up with broader geographical information and trends. So the report tries to create one single estimate on migrant workers, but also looks at broad geographical distributions, disaggregations by income level, and where possible by skill level of workers, although that, as you'll see in a bit, is quite a challenging area to focus on. It uses both international data, think the data from UNHESA, from World Bank, from OECD, and standardized national data sources which have been submitted through the questionnaire I mentioned earlier. So just to give you a very broad overview, we'll start global and then we'll work our way down to more regional and sub-regional levels. The report estimates that there are about 258 million migrants globally, of which 90%, 234 million, are working age, which already goes to show that the vast majority of migrants are, if they're not working, in any case, of working age eligible to work. Of those 234 million, 164, that is about 70% of them, are economically active, which is labor force participation rate of migrant workers globally is about 70%, which is considerably higher than the labor force participation rate of non-migrants, of everybody who hasn't moved, which stands at about 61.5%. And this is just to give you an idea of the kind of conclusions one might draw from this data for policy purposes. You can already see that migrant workers are globally, on average, this is of course not saying anything in individual countries or for individual workers, more economically active than non-migrants, and hence could argue have a very meaningful impact on local labor markets. Now, of course, you can question why migrants as a group would be more active than non-migrants. There's, of course, a self-selection issue. If you choose to migrate, you might, by definition, already be more motivated than somebody who doesn't make that choice. But that is making a lot of assumptions which we can't really draw from the data itself. But it is to show where we can start thinking in terms of using data for policymaking. If we look at that same document, the global estimates, produces estimates for sub-Saharan Africa, and it finds slightly different figures. 75% of migrants in sub-Saharan Africa are of working age, and about 69% of those who are of working age are economically active. And this is just marginally less than the labor force participation rate of non-migrants, which suggests that there is, I mean, we're talking about quite a large region that we're covering, could include frontier workers or seasonal workers, and might be suggestive of very big similarities between migrant workers and non-migrant workers who are simply looking for employment regardless of where a border might be, for instance. So that's yet another conclusion one might draw based on data for sub-Saharan Africa. Now, this is a global report produced by ILO headquarters together with the Statistics Department and the Migration Department. The African Union Commission itself has also produced a report, and I'm sure you've all seen this report and have it memorized and know very well the information in it, together with the JLMP, the Joint Labor Migration Program, which is a collaboration between the African Union the ILO, the IOM, and UNECA, if I'm not mistaken. And I've produced similar data using similar processes, a similar questionnaire, in fact, focusing specifically on the African continent, and more specifically produce a profile, if you will, on the Sadek region. So this is just a little background information. The African Union report is the second report, again, capturing data from 2008 to 2015, trying to make estimates for up to 2017. Uses the International Labour Migration Questionnaire, shows that on the African level, the labor force participation rate of migrant workers is about 73%. And that figure might differ very slightly from the figures in the ILO's global estimates, depending on the data submitted by national offices, on slight variations in estimation procedures, and in ways of estimating missing data. But it could also differ because it's based on very limited migration data. Of the 48 African countries which submitted data to this report, only 30 of them actually included data on labor migration. Just another reminder that there are some challenges to producing better statistics on labor migration data in the African region, but there's also, because of that, great opportunities to do so. Now, if we look specifically at the Sadek profile that this report produced, you see relatively similar trends to the global estimates report. You see that 84% of migrants in the Sadek region are of working age, slightly more than in sub-Saharan Africa. But here again, you see that 73.5% of working age migrants are economically active, which is a lot more than the 60% of non-migrants which are economically active, which again suggests that migrants are more strongly involved in the labor market than non-migrants are, which is not to say that they're more productive necessarily, just that they are there for more for the purpose of being economically active. Why do I mention all this information? It helps in the process of formulating policies on labor migration, especially at the Sadek level. But the challenge that we face, as Maria has already explained, is that within the Southern African region, for many of the tables that data is collected on, there's very limited response in the number of countries that actually submit the data. Now, for the basic indicators, the stock and flow indicators, beg your pardon, about between 11 and 13 countries have submitted some data, but it's 1 or 2 points in time, and sometimes not even from the same data source, making it not only difficult to compare between countries, but also difficult to even compare trends within one country, strictly speaking. And as you get into more detailed disaggregations, the numbers of countries and the amount of data per country drops off very, very quickly, down to the point of flow data and nationals abroad. As Maria said, where only one country submitted data. Now, why should that be a reason for us to want to push for more data collection? Well, in my language, we say, if you lose your keys at night and you only search where the light is, you're not doing very well. And that's what happens here. If the best data we have available to produce policy at regional levels, for instance, at the Sadek level, but keep in mind that the report also produces profiles for other regional economic communities. So there's a COMESA report as well, there's an EAC report, there's a Sensad report. If the best data we have available to produce, to inform policies is based on only a limited number of countries within the region, then the outcomes will reflect the needs of those countries that are submitting data or producing data. Hence, in order to address all of the specific national needs or more accurately reflect the realities at the regional level, we need to be able to see more of the information of what is actually happening within countries at the regional level. And just to emphasize that point a little bit further, I wanted to show you just a few of the tables that we have information on. This is of all of the Southern African and Indian Ocean countries. Within the database, the tables, as you can see on the total population, total labor force, total employed population, are about 45% completed. Again, that's based on data from 11 to 13 countries within the Southern African region. Yet we still don't have, we can't even complete the tables halfway. And when you start asking about migrant active and employed populations, we only managed to complete about 15% of what we would like to see in the tables. Migrant population of working age 12, and it becomes even less when you're looking at inflows, immigrants, and outflows. And of course, remittances data is a little bit more well documented. So there you see that there's a little bit more information available. But all of this is to show that there is a great opportunity here to expand the amount of information that exists in these databases at national levels. And having said that, I'd like to come back a little bit to some of the more technical implementation side and not just focus on data themselves. Looking at how to work towards better and more harmonized labor migration data in Southern Africa, and particularly how the SAMM project can support this process. So we can think about regional labor migration reports. We can think about labor migration reports specific to each regional economic community. We can think about LMO, a labor migration observatory, which supports data harmonization not only between countries, but can also help moving the discussion up to regional and continental levels. And finally, as I mentioned before, comparable data is a way of leveling the playing field between countries, ensuring that evidence-based policies better reflect regional realities and national idiosyncrasies. And how can SAMM support this process? Well, there's a lot of work that we can do on capacity development, both for data producers as well as data users. I'm sure that you have heard it mentioned already by the organizers, and if not, you will in the near future. On the courses, the workshops that the SAMM Project is offering in the coming months, the courses that the ITC is offering itself in the coming months, and the possibility for taking part in a diploma for labor migration experts and practitioners, which build on all of those courses, which we can provide support to. The project also supports data collection activities in terms of national statistics, as well as supporting those institutions which produce administrative data. All of the implementing partners have specialization in their areas for focusing on whether it's labor migration, mixed migration flows, refugee flows, enforcement of protection of vulnerable migrants. All of those areas are areas where we can collect better data, and it can also contribute to improving labor migration data in Southern Africa, and I'll come to that in just a minute. And finally, strengthening regional collaboration and exchange. We're very keen to support knowledge sharing, dialogue mechanisms at the REC level, at the cross-national level, and between the various data users, be they policymakers, academics, what have you. So one last thing I would like to come back to before opening the floor up to questions and reflections is the mention of the labor market observatory and some minimum indicators based on those that you heard from Maria earlier. Now, the idea is that we produce an integrated Sadek labor market database, a proposed labor market observatory, if you will. which has an inclusive governance structure and will integrate critical information on labor markets, but also on labor migration and skills in the region based on the standardized labor market indicators, such as those that Maria has already mentioned, total population, the economically active, the employed, average working hours, job vacancies, information on wages and sectoral occupational distributions, and where possible, ideally, average sectoral hours and wages, vacancies disaggregated geographically by province territory, and then crucially also looking at the number of discouraged job seekers and people in so-called NEET, which is not in employment, education, or training. Labor market information systems, which is what this essentially is, are something that have been on Sadek's agenda for quite some time, and this proposal aims to support that. At the same time, the aim of SAMM to produce a labor migration observatory fits very well within this structure, because, again, as Maria has explained, we want to look at exactly the same indicators disaggregated for migration status or for country of birth or country of origin, depending on how an individual country defines it. So with that in mind, the SAMM project is proposing that at regional levels, we develop a set of minimum labor migration indicators. Producing a set of indicators to measure labor migration trends provides an essential resource for effective, responsive, and evidence-based labor and labor migration governance at both national and regional levels. And the most important indicators, the most minimum indicators we would want to make sure to get from all countries, from all of you, is first the share of migrants, whether they are foreign-born or non-citizens, in the working age population, and the stock of international migrant workers by country of origin or citizenship. If possible, we would also then encourage looking at labor force participation rates of migrant workers within the working age population, and the stock of return international migrant workers in the country of measurement, whether you're a sending country, a destination country, or an origin country. Now, those are some of the most basic indicators we would like to see arising at national levels, and want to integrate with labor market indicators within this observatory. Where possible, it's of course would be great to expand those indicators into several other areas, which is another reason why looking at the data produced through a labor market observatory makes a lot of sense, since it looks at, again, similar issues such as working conditions of international migrant workers. Think of hours worked, wages, access to social protection and healthcare, etc. A very big one is looking at skills of workers, in particular international migrant workers, and that's not only useful for tracking skills matching between countries and mismatch of skills of international migrant workers, but can also serve as a basis and perhaps even a benchmark for monitoring and implementing the Sadek qualifications framework, which is part of, which is included in the Sadek Labor Migration Action Plan, to ensure that there is coherence of qualifications frameworks between countries and adheres to the same standards at the Sadek level. And this would be an ideal mechanism, an ideal medium to help chart that or to see progress in that process. Then we can also think of looking at indicators on the vulnerability to labor exploitation. And here I'm talking about, for instance, issues such as ensuring fair recruitment, looking at recruitment costs of workers, which is an issue that is quite high on the agenda, and has even been given its own SDG indicator 10.7.1, which looks at recruitment costs as a share of monthly income of a worker abroad. But You can also think about looking at issues of trafficking for labor exploitation or even forced labor figures as a way of tracking information on the vulnerability of exploitation. And finally, where possible and where necessary, it would even open up room to look at refugees' access to the labor market. And you can imagine producing figures on the employment rates among migrant or among refugees and duration of employment, these kind of indicators, which would be very useful in ensuring refugees' rights, access to rights. So that is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm going to hand the floor back to the moderators now. I hope we can talk a little bit about, in the time we have left, about some of the reflections that we've had over the course of the presentation. I've had the presentation on full screen, so I haven't seen the chat come by, I'm afraid. And then I saw some hands being raised during the presentation, so I'm sure there are a few questions that we can address as well. Thank you very much. Back to you, Fernando.
Thank you very much, Jess and Maria. Indeed, we have a couple of questions already here in the forum, and more are coming. So and fortunately, we still have a lot of time. So we have about 20 minutes to address questions, and so I propose I will start to read the first ones. I don't know if you have also access to the chat and you are able to see some of the questions during the presentation. I think actually you have addressed a couple of them already, and the comments we had in the chat, they also resonate a lot with what we said. So they basically have confirmed what you have presented. So. So let's go. I start asking the first questions, and we're having a lot of questions now. So we're going to have some fun.
Very encouraging.
for the next couple of minutes. So the first question has to do with the quotas. How many countries in Sadek have quotas in employment policy?
Sorry, could you say that again? Quotas?
Yeah. How many countries in Sadek have quotas in employment policy?
I might have to leave that to my colleagues, labor migration experts in the audience, but no, I think I'm going to leave it there. I'm not going to give an answer that I don't know completely. So I might have to refer to Theo for that, if he's in the room, if he's willing to give some thoughts on that. Quotas, quota-based employment policies.
Maybe we could go to the next question after we can come back if you have some more information to add on that. So the second one I have here, what kind of indicators do we have to consider when organizing a database on statistics to complete labor migration that allows monitoring and implementing labor migration policies that respond to the need of the country?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question, which I think I touched on a little bit in when presenting the indicators that we're recommending for the Southern African region's labor market and labor migration observatory. Frankly, the data that we have right now varies enormously between countries. So. I don't know what country the question came from, but in a country which produces regular labor force surveys and has data that can be disaggregated to the level of occupations and sectors and skills, then you already that's your answer. You want to produce data on employment as well as unemployment. initially on let's stick to stocks of migrants, which will help give an indication of where in what areas and what occupations migrant workers tend to dominate or tend to be most present. So, I mean, I'm sure we all know that a very large proportion of, for instance, women migrant workers, we discussed this yesterday, in fact, end up in domestic work as one of the main low-skilled occupations for migrant workers. And knowing that can help you develop policies that are more responsive to the needs of that particular group. I mean, you're already talking there about the intersectionality between women in employment in a domestic situation as well as being a migrant. So that gives you an indication of where you need to focus specific policy attention on labor migration governance. But if Maria wants to jump in with any of this, please feel free.
Okay, yes, I wanted to add to that. So, like we said, it is important to establish migrant status, country of birth, or citizenship. So, for example, when you are running your labor force survey, if you have your questions which allow you to establish that, then this is a start. Then it means that you can then generate your usual labor market indicators, and then you disaggregate them by migrant status. So the 20th ICLS, for example, gives some indication about what constitutes the core indicators. So these are the usual labor market indicators: labor force participation rate, your employment to population ratio, your unemployment rate, for the migrant population, or disaggregated by those who are migrants and not migrants. And once you have done this, once you are able to classify them, then you can tabulate them by other characteristics. So the usual socio-demographic characteristics like sex, age, marital status, education level, then also purpose of migration, type of visa, if possible, if you do have this type of information from your labor force survey, you might not, or the characteristics of the work that they are doing, and this is very important. So like I said, the labor force status, the occupation, even the status in employment. So some countries will have this information in the labor force survey, but not at regular intervals. And some will only be able to get them from their population and housing census, because they have not included it in any labor force survey, or perhaps labor force survey is infrequent. So it really depends on the context. So I don't know if, since I have the floor, if I can just answer another question here about the frequency of collection. Can I?
Sure.
Yes, so frequency of collection, that also is an issue. So like I said, it depends on which sources we're using. So like for countries which have information on migrants from the census, then we will get information every 10 years. And that is a very long time in between to not have data. But in this region, well, part of this region, there has been initiatives to encourage countries to conduct labor force surveys every 2 years. And there has been some work towards that, but there has been setbacks with COVID. So I wouldn't say that there is a specific frequency that is set. It is the same as for your labor force survey. So in this region, we are saying that at least every 2 years for labor force survey. But this is not the case in all of the countries. And of course, there are data which comes from the admin source. From the admin source, data, you can get them on a more frequent basis. But actually, they are harder to compile and to make use of. So actually, even if countries they do have this data, they are not using it for the purpose of reporting on labor migration statistics. So I hope this helps with some of the questions.
Thanks, Maria. Actually, there is one question here that one of the latest ones that's quite interesting. Which countries in Sadek region are doing better in terms of handling of migration data, so that other countries can learn from them?
Should I answer that, or?
That's up to you.
Sure, you can make a start.
Okay. Well, I can say a few words. So I wouldn't answer it in terms of which country is doing better, but what I can say is statistics. South Africa has taken steps to sort of improve their database for labor migration stats. So Statistics South Africa, they conduct a quarterly labor force survey, but they don't always collect data on all of the modules every quarter. So they reserve the third quarter of each year for a specific module. So I am not sure if the labor migration data from household survey is included in one of those third quarter rounds. This one I will have to check, but what I do know is that they have taken steps to work with the migration data from official statistics. So there's a bit of work going on there. I don't know if others want to join in at this point.
Yeah, I'll just quickly jump in if I may. What I wanted to say was, I think it was in 2012 and 2017 that Statistics South Africa used the labor migration module in their labor force survey. At the same time, there are about, I believe, 5 countries which have used the Sadek labor migration module in their surveys, whether that's one time or recurring, differs a little bit. But there is definitely a sufficient base of material and of products or documents that we can work with to very easily help any country that is interested in improving their labor migration data to do so. That is in line with both international standards as well as Sadek recommendations. So we do have these this guidance available to any countries that are looking at improving their labor migration data collection. Thank you.
Thank you to both of you.
Sorry.
Please.
To add to that, I just want to say that Namibia also has taken steps to improve their inflows data.
Okay.
Thank you.
I see that Theo Sparbon from ILO is also has his hand raised, so I think he would like to jump into discussion as well. Theo, you can just open your mic.
Thanks, Fernando, and good morning, everybody. My name is Theo Sparbon, a labor migration specialist for the ILO in Pretoria. And just on the last question, I think it is important in the context of Sadek that the Sadek labor migration module exists, and it is also a vehicle, I think, for further dialogue among the countries how to improve labor migration statistics in the respective countries. But I raised my hand actually to go back to the earlier question regarding quota, the use of quota in the governance of labor migration. I did not hear, or whether the speaker who asked the question was referring to a specific region or more generally. What we know is that there is, I don't think at the moment, a clear overview of how many countries are using a quota system. Also because it depends a little bit, how you define a quota system. Do you have something in mind, that is really based on labor market information, indicators, a wealth of information, which is, for example, used in the UK, but also to some extent in South Africa. Or if you have in mind a more limited version, that you say certain sectors are basically excluded from migrant workers. So it depends a little bit on the definition. But in the context of the project, of the SAMM project, we actually discussed to do a study into this very topic, because I don't think we have at this moment a clear overview of what is happening in particular in African countries. My impression is that quota systems are more prevalent in high-income countries, but I don't have the evidence at hand to actually show that. So thanks very much. Back to you, Fernando.
Thanks a lot, Theo, for clarifying that. Now I would like to jump to another question we have here about the situation of abusive situations. So, is there any data regarding migrants who have been victims of abusive situations?
There is, in principle, that data. It's depends, of course, on national context and on whether that data is being recorded very actively. But you can look at trafficking in persons data, for instance. The data on forced labor might be a little bit more challenging, since since it is a very since it is forced labor, it's not being recorded. It's done illicitly and meant to hide from authorities. So getting estimates of forced labor can be quite challenging. Although the ILO does do it, produces estimates similar to the estimates on labor migration. I'm not sure to what extent we drill down to national level data. These estimates are regional level estimates, and potentially sub-regional level estimates, but they're also based on a lot of imputation and might not speak to individual country particularities, if you will.
Can I add on to this one?
Yes, please.
Okay, so now going beyond the forced labor, so I'm referring to other types of abusive relationships. So there are countries who conduct specific surveys to get a picture of what's happening within households, for example. So I'm talking about these kind of relationships, abuse, violence, or sexual abuse, sexual violence at home or in the workplace. For these types of surveys, it is difficult to establish migrant status, or if you do establish migrant status, or if you do establish nationality, that is all you can do. So you can disaggregate your data by those who are nationals or not nationals. So because it takes a lot of effort and it costs a lot, and to actually sort of merge, for example, violence survey with a module on, I don't know, violence in the workplace or in the households. So there are data out there. I know of countries who have done it, who have probably disaggregated data by nationality. But I don't know to what extent we can say that they are doing it specifically for the migrant population. Thank you. Thanks
a lot. We have a couple of questions also related to how data is obtained in the Sadek region. So maybe if you could elaborate a little bit more on that, on letting people know specifically for the Sadek region how data is obtained and what mechanisms are used to access it.
Okay, so I think this I will start, and I don't know if others want to jump in. So within this region, like we said, we have encouraged countries within the Sadek region to conduct a labor force survey every 2 years, and to at one point include the labor migration module. We call it a labor migration module within this survey. So we know that now with the 20 years ICLS, we might need to revise this module to make it a bit more updated. So this is one way in which we are encouraging countries within this region to compile data for migration status. But like I said, there are some initiatives to help countries also start working on their admin data, but I think I can say that we are not yet there, but there are initiatives which have started. So we recognize that there are countries which can only submit data based on population and housing census. So normally for labor market indicators, it is preferable if we use data from a labor force survey rather than from the census. But for some countries, this is the only source of data that they have on migrants. So we in this case, then data on the labor force characteristics disaggregated by migrant status will have to be used from population and housing census. So the team in Geneva from the unit I talked about, so they sent a questionnaire and countries fill in the questionnaires. Like I said, they collect information on counts and they calculate the rates in-house. So these are some of the ways in which data is compiled for this region. I don't know if at this point Jesse wants to talk again about the observatory, or perhaps there is no need.
Perhaps just a few words to say that, I mean, there is no one authoritative source or method for getting labor migration data nowhere in the world. And that is why I think we have this labor migration statistics database and the questionnaire that we send to countries in order to compile the information that is available, whether that comes from a census, whether that comes from a labor force survey, or whether that comes from administrative records. We want to collate the information that's there, and I hope I'm not saying something that might anger Maria. They might not always be exactly the same information and therefore not 100% comparable with each other, but they do give an indication of the trends within a country, however limited the information might be, and that is better than nothing. So that's why the data we compile, is not produced by us ourselves. It is collected from what is available within national sources, and that's why you saw Maria's slide with all of the complementary sources that can be used, which goes way beyond the 3 that I mentioned. And that is what we're trying to encourage through the Labor Market Observatory and Labor Migration Observatory, to encourage countries in the region to use the same questionnaire and to try, to the extent possible, to stick to the same concepts and definitions and methodologies for collecting that information, so that the information that we do have can provide us with reliable, valid policy implications or recommendations. I think that's the extent of what I wanted to add. This might lead into another question which I saw on informality, but I'll leave that to you, Fernando.
Okay, I think we're getting close to the end now. We have a specific question related to availability of data on sexual violence, if there is any data related to this topic that's available in the Sadek region.
I don't know if Theo has more information, but within the ILO stat database, I haven't seen such a data. So I don't know if perhaps it is collected through other surveys or through other agencies which are not ILO, because there are other agencies collecting data on migrants, which are not ILO. But for sexual violence, I'm not aware if there is any.
Yeah, that's a very specific point. And okay, so let's move to the last question. That's actually that's a group of questions that they have to do with basically what can be done to improve the availability of data in the Sadek region. So maybe you could finish with general comments on that, basically points that we could improve and what could be done in a general way to improve the availability of data on labor migration in the region.
Okay, I can start and Jesse can finish. So, like Jesse mentioned, and I mentioned earlier, there is this SAMM initiative, and it is the hope that through this initiative, we can get more countries to start compiling. So, give countries the resources or the training that they need to first of all understand the guidelines of the 20th ICLS. So I find that when it comes to migration statistics, there is a bit of maybe it's not easily understood. Maybe it is not intuitive. It is something which you have to sit with and understand. So countries need proper training to understand the different terms, to understand the definition, first of all. And then countries need to be encouraged, perhaps given resources, or I don't know if they can come up with the sources to include this in their, first of all, in the labor force questionnaire. So we have taken this initiative in the past, whereby we have encouraged countries to use the Sadek module for labor migration statistics in their countries. There were workshops which were organized. So the module which was developed was simple enough. Like I said, now it needs to be revised to take on board the guidelines of the 20th ICLF. So coming up with such a module in the region, I think will definitely help, because often you hear other people saying there is no labor migration module. So, and this is where the difficulty lies. So this makes it a bit difficult for countries to know which questions to include in their questionnaire. So if we as a group can do what was done in the past and revise this module and encourage countries to start compiling this information, then I think it will be a start. So I am personally advocating for labor force survey, because this is the platform, this is the medium that you have to get your labor market indicators. So once you get your migrant status from this, then I think you're a long way ahead. Then there are other initiatives which will come with regards to admin data, but I think that this is a start. Over to you, Jesse.
Thank you very much, Maria. I think you've said most of it. I'm not going to repeat too much, but what I would like to say is that part of the reason for this session and for the upcoming course on dedicated to labor migration statistics in Southern Africa is not just to speak to the statisticians and to the labor producers among us, but, and here I direct myself specifically to line ministries and to data users. It's important for you to understand the particularities of labor migration data and some of the complexities in collecting that information, including in the informal economy, which through a labor force survey you should be able to address a little bit, but I'm not going to go into that area, but there are methodologies. We are developing ways of reaching out to more migrant workers through surveys in order to better reflect the reality of migrant workers within a country. But it's important for all the practitioners to understand these processes and to make the demand or the need for that data clear to the producers. So the request needs to come from you to those who are producing administrative data, to those who are producing statistics, that this is a priority and that these data need to be, or these processes need to be integrated into regular data production processes. So labor force surveys need modules, administrative data needs to be, well, ideally would be standardized in a way that it can be combined with other administrative data or other statistics. But that request comes from you at the national level, from the users. Thank you.
I see. Meanwhile, Theo was able to find also some information related to the sexual offenses in South Africa specifically. So he has just posted in the chat a link to a report that has a scope of details regarding that. And I think with that we finish with the questions. I'd like to thank you very much, Maria, Jess, and Tel for clarifying those points, and also mention that while I was browsing through the questions here, I saw a lot of very positive comments in the chat, like many people thanking you for the very nice presentation and saying that it was really complete and great. So I would like to express that. Among the questions, there are a lot of very positive comments and feedback. So I have the impression that the participants, they are quite happy with this session. And I don't know if you have a few final comments or if you would like to mention anything before we go to the coffee break.
From my side, just to thank you as well for the opportunity to speak, and to thank you for the very active engagement. I'm very glad to have seen so many questions arising and so much conversation coming out of this topic. That's it for me, and I wish you a good break and a good rest of the week.
Thank you very much. Maybe Ishan, I don't know if Ishan has any announcement or anything to say, or if you can go right away to the coffee break, Ishan?
I think we can go right away to the coffee break, Fernando.
Okay, perfect. So now it's 10:37 Pretoria time, and I would propose you to come back at 11. So we start our next session in about 25 minutes. Okay, so I wish you a nice coffee and a nice break, and see you in 25 minutes.
Session, which will be concentrating on the beginning of a new activity, group activity, that we are going to start tomorrow, and we are going to repeat for the next 10 days, always in a virtual way. Of course, we are going to start our activity with a Gloria and Tel's presentation about the report about the about labor migration governance in the Southern Africa region, and they are going to expose the results of this report, which will be the base of our work next in the next days, they are going to explain everything. And in this afternoon, you are going to receive an email with some parts of the report, and you're going to know more details about our next activities for we are going to explain it all. So, Gloria, I think that you have a presentation, in PowerPoint presentation. So the floor is yours, Gloria and Theo, and we can start the second session.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much, colleagues. I hope that you can hear me.
Muito obrigado, colegas. Eu acho
Yes,
Yes,
okay.
loud and clear.
And can you see my screen?
Yes, we can. Maybe can you go to the presentation mode just to check if?
Okay. Wait a minute.
Yeah, it's so it's just in the perfect.
Okay.
Yeah,
Can you see it
like
now?
That. Very well.
Okay.
Very well.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Today we are going to be starting a process of, I would say, 10 to 15 days of work together on the validation of a report that we would like to publish within the next months. It's a report that compiles a lot of information on all the subjects that we have been discussing this week. It is what we called a stock-taking report on labor migration governance in the Southern Africa region. So it covers work in all the 16 countries. And for this report, I would like to mention the main objectives of the report, which were to have, as I said, to bring together a lot of the information on labor migration and policy development in the Sadek region, to assess the status of ratification of our international standards on migrant workers and related standards to the protection to the good governance of labor migration, to summarize work on social security portability of benefits for migrant workers, to identify work on qualifications, frameworks, and other systems that help to recognize, to advance in the recognition of qualifications for migrant workers in the Sadek region, and to provide an overview of current labor migration data patterns, sources, and an inventory of methods. So the objective of this validation exercise is to check together with you if the information included is correct, and if possible, to complement it. But this is, of course, depending on the time that you can spend on this exercise. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So today we are going to be distributing to you the 7 extracts that we have pulled out of the stock-taking report, covering the 7 thematic areas that we are studying this week. The 7 extracts will be distributed in the 3 languages, and I'm going to be presenting today the questions and timeline. Well, this is the timeline, in fact, of the exercise. The extracts will be sent by email to the address that you see here, and will be also uploaded on the eCampus. Tomorrow, we will break out into meeting rooms, as the facilitators will be visiting you in those breakout rooms. So we will meet at the same time that we met, that we started the work today. So this will be the first discussion, and we will break out into country delegations. So yes, so we will have 16 breakout rooms. During your discussions, you will be asked to please name a moderator and to get organized and agree how you are going to be working within the next 10 days in this exercise. The ITC-ILO will send a Google Doc that each country delegation can work on, again, to the same address that you see on the screen. And this Google Doc will also be available on the eCampus. During the 10 days after the 26th of March, you will have the time to check on accuracy of the information and complement if possible, as we said, but only please touch the information that refers to your country. So during those 10 days, you will get the Google Doc finalized. And of course, need to meet or e-meet with your colleagues to do this work. You will be in charge of organizing yourselves the meetings if you need to meet during these 10 days when more convenient for you. So in fact, during the first discussion, you will also be expected to set up a...
Sorry, Gloria, I had to mute you. You're still muted.
Okay. Okay, so during the 10 days, you will be asked to please organize a meeting with your colleagues to finalize the document, to finalize the Google document. And yes, so probably during your first discussion, you set up already that the date of your meeting. And also you will be asked to name a rapporteur who will represent your country and present the outcome of your discussion on the next date when you will be meeting with, the 6th of April. So we will meet again with us in all the participants from the 16 Sadek countries, on the 6th of April. And then you will give a 5 minutes presentation. So we will hear a 5 minutes presentation from each of your delegations that same day. And please do not forget to send us your the summary or the work that you've been doing together. I mean, to send us all the information, a summary of your work. I mean, by that I mean the additional documentations that if you have any additional documentations that you would like to give us, please don't forget to send that to us. With that, I go to the next slide. Okay, so the 7 extracts, I will not go into this because they cover the areas that you've been discussing this week, the 7 areas, thematic areas that we've been covering. And I will just mention very briefly some of the questions. The first question in each of the thematic areas will always be checking about factual errors, and if you have any comments regarding the report and suggestions for improvement. And then you have 2 more specific questions per thematic area. If you can provide additional information. This is not compulsory, this is not obligatory. So just if you have the time to provide that complementary information, that would be great, because we could improve even more the report. But if you just cannot find the time, well, we will just need to continue doing research and complementing as we go along through the project. We will complement information on each of the thematic areas through other means, through additional research, as I said. So fair recruitment, the same thing. The first question always the same. Checking on accuracy of the information, and then complementary information, second and third question. the same thing, bilateral labor agreements, social protection, skills recognition, international labor migration statistics, the session that you just heard today. So we will be sending you this PowerPoint also with the questions, and I think Medium also wanted to include each of the questions in the Google document that will be sent to you. So I will probably leave the floor now to Theo and then also to Miriam to complement what I've been explaining, and probably give additional information. Theo, I leave you the floor.
Great, thanks very much, Gloria. I think you have covered much of what needs to be said for this session. Perhaps only to add that if you look at the extracts of the 7 topics, and you see in some cases, in particular for the policies, there is quite a lot of country information that you can actually verify. In the case of other topics, and in particular, for example, with regards to skills recognition, there is very little country information. There is only some information on what has happened at the Sadek level. So in that case, the first question, is of limited relevance. There's not likely to be much factual error in this very short write-up, because it is mostly concerning the regional level, which and that information has been sourced directly from regional documentation. So there it would really be of great benefit for the report and for the project if the country groups can make an effort to provide at least the basic information. If you have anything to add. So it is true the second and the third question are not necessarily mandatory, but it would be great if you can make the effort, because that information is simply not available in the project at the moment. So on topics where there is very little information, it would be great, if you can make the effort to complement that information. I think that is everything from my side at this stage, Gloria. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Theo. Probably Miriam, if you would like to complement, are you here with us?
Gloria, I think Miriam, she's not with us. Let me just check here. Miriam, yeah, actually, she had another urgent issue to solve. So she let us here to take care of the session. But I think I guess the next step from us now, it's going to be to send the information to the extracts to the participants, so that you can start reading and getting familiar with the information before we start the group discussion tomorrow. That's the idea, right?
Exactly. Yes, exactly. That's it.
Okay, perfect. So this is not going to be a session like the other ones. It's mostly what we're doing right now is explaining you how things, what are going to be the next steps. So and now we were going to send you by mail the extracts, and we would like you to have a look at this information, to read that. To be ready to start the group work tomorrow morning at the same time as in the previous day. So that's when you are actually going to divide you by groups. And so what you have to do is still today. It's basically what we're going to do is we are replacing this next hour that you would be here working in the real-time session for 1 hour of dedication in the afternoon to go through the information that we're going to send you by email. That's the idea today.
Exactly.
Perfect, perfect. So I think maybe it would be also a good idea to, if participants, they have doubts and questions, that we could maybe to use the chat right now to clarify any specific point that's not, that was not covered. So feel free for the next few minutes, if you have questions or comments, we can use now the chat to address this issue. Meanwhile, also if Gloria and Tel, we would like to add anything else about the report, or maybe any specific point that you would like to detail a little bit while we wait for questions in the chat.
Maybe one additional point which we did not discuss beforehand, but which occurs to me now. We will principally distribute the extracts on the series of topics, because that will be the main focus of the group work, and that is basically the information on each topic that is available in the report. I'm just wondering, and I'm also looking at Gloria here, whether we should also make available the complete report so that participants can actually see where this is going to, not for them to read it from cover to cover, but to see how the extracts fit in the overall report. I think it might be helpful.
Okay, that can be done, Theo, as long as it is clear for participants that it's not the bulk or the huge report that they need to go over.
Yes.
Yes, I mean, as long as it's not more confusing to them. So it's only the extracts that you will be asked to verify if the information is correct or complement if possible. But as I said, it's not compulsory to complement. Do not spend too much time if you do not have it complementing, because then we can always find researchers to try to help us to complement the information if you don't have it handy. If it's not easily available to you. I know that you have full-time jobs, so we're not asking you to go overboard to try to help us. So as Theo mentioned, there are some sections that are weaker than others, like the one on skills and fair recruitment, where we would really appreciate getting your inputs. Yes, I think with that we can.
There is one specific question here about the sources of information when participants, when they provide information, if they have to mention the source of the information.
Yes, please do so. And in fact, we always requested in the questions to please send us original documents if possible, because we cannot just quote any information out of our ideas or experience. If possible, if you have original government documentation or information that can really prove that work is going on, or it's much better for us. Thank you.
There is also an important issue about this activity we're starting now. That's part of it. It's going to happen through eCampus as well. So in the virtual cafe area, we're going to create a forum for each one of the countries. So that's also going to be one of the areas for discussing about this activity. So it's very important for the participants that were not yet able to access eCampus. That's very important that you do that as soon as possible. So we know that few participants, they are struggling with questions of credentials, of username and password. So if this is your case, please write an email to migration@itclo.org. So you have the address here in the chat. And let us know that you are having trouble accessing the campus, and we're going to do our best to assist you and to help you with that. So I'm posting again the email here in the chat. So and also regarding languages, what we're going to do is for each one of the countries, we're going to use the language country. So that's how basically for Mozambique, for Angola, we're going to have Portuguese. For South Africa, we're going to have English, and this is how we're going to deal with the language issue. So basically, it's going to be for the country language. And I think in terms of the comments in the chat, I think you have, we have covered what participants they have mentioned so far. So,
Fernando, I think some people had a bad connection, so they didn't actually hear how they are going to be able to answer the questions. Maybe you can go over that.
Okay, so Gloria, would like to repeat that part?
Yes. So first of all, I think it is important that we post also the PowerPoint of today, so that if possible, also in the 3 languages, so that the participants have the timeline in mind. And also the questions, we should not forget about that. But as I said, each of the sections has a broader question, which is mainly about verification of the information relative to your country that appears in the extract. And each extract is about a thematic area that we covered during this course. So we will cover 7 thematic areas, the 7 thematic areas. We will also provide you with the full report so that you can see how the information fits within that report. Please do not think that you have to go over the full report, but only, as we said, specific country information in each of the thematic areas, so each of the extracts. The second and third question of each that appear on the PowerPoint are more specific and more about complementary information. If you think that you do not have enough time, because it does require a lot of time to go over that, to try to dig information and try to complement, do not worry. We understand that you are extremely busy, but we will be very happy if you could find the time to help us complement that information, if you can find that time. So for the moment, I think the most important part will be the first question, which is about verification of the information. And as we said, if possible, sending us the original documentation that can help us verify, yes, that the modifications that you are suggesting. And I think overall is that. I mean, it's mainly the verification is the most important part, the first question.
Yes,
was that clear?
I think so, and also we are going to send you also the presentation, Gloria's PowerPoint, together with the mail we are sending you today. So there you have the timeline, and you have also the details about the schedule and specifically the points you have to address. So I think if we don't have more questions, if we don't have more doubts, we could maybe finish for now. Maybe Ishan has also something to add. Ishan?
Yes, thank you, Fernando. I see in the, sorry, my camera was not working, but I see in the chat, there's several questions about accessing the platform. So as I was mentioning earlier, we have a list of those of you who were not able to access the platform as of yet. So what we are going to do is to make sure that we have the correct emails, because most of you keep saying that you don't receive those. We'll check the emails, and this afternoon you will be receiving a new invitation to access the platform. And we have received your emails, so don't be worried if you have not received the response. You're going to get it today. So you will all be receiving another invitation to access the platform later this afternoon. I think that's it from my side. Thank you, Fernando.
Okay, thank you very much, Ishan. Thank you, Gloria. Thank you, Tel. Thank you for all you participants. And I think with that, we're getting to the end of today's session. Well, let's say to the end of the real time part, because you still have this second part that's reviewing the material that we're going to send you by email and think about getting ready to the exercise that's going to start tomorrow, again at 9 a.m. Pretoria time, as in the previous days. And so with that, I wish you a very nice afternoon, and looking forward to see you all tomorrow here for our more interactive part of the course. So thank you very much to everyone, and see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. See you tomorrow.